Hello, everyone. We'll be starting the webinar in about 1 minute. Please stand by. Good day. My name is George DeMarco, ESX Chair, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first 2012 ESXperience webinar titled Hiring and Firing for Success. We have a great event today featuring Cathy McBride, Central Station Manager, and Don Childers, Director of Technical Training, both from Alarm South in North Carolina. We all know the process of hiring, retaining, and firing employees is not easy, but with the right preparation and practice, these skills can be mastered. In today's highly competitive world, these management skills are absolutely essential for companies to be successful. In this webinar, whether you are an owner, a hiring manager, or an HR professional, you'll learn about the 4 stages of hiring and firing, which will help you in handling the most difficult personnel decisions. At the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a short Q&A session, so please submit your question in the questions window on the right-hand side of your screen. With that, I'm going to pass the baton off. Please welcome Cathy and Don.
Good afternoon to everyone. During this webinar, this is something I want everyone to think about from start to finish. This is a quote that I, at Security Central, we as a team live by. Hire for the future, not for today. So going forward, if you keep that in mind, I'm sure you will benefit from all the topics that we're going to start off with. Don?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Don Childers from Alarm South. I'm the Director of Technical Training. This afternoon, we hope to bring you some new ideas and concepts on of the practice of hiring and firing. It can be not actually joyful, but we can make it a little bit easier to bear. Hiring is does cost money to do so, to train and properly maintain people, and so we want to make the best out of that we can, and we feel that a lot of that comes early on in the early processes of hiring and firing. When you look at our synopsis for our class today, we're going to talk about hiring as stage 1. Stage 2 will be the interview itself. You'll notice there it says the interview is actually the first impression, because the application process is the first impression. Then training and termination. And we hope that if you get just one thing out of today that you didn't have before, that we will have been successful in what we've tried to do today. Cathy?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start. The first one is hiring, the application. Now, when we look at the application, it is so pertinent that we hire for a specific job duty. The applicant needs to know exactly what they're being interviewed for. The applicant also needs to understand the criteria of that job
position. What we do is we actually ask our employees for recommendations, because with those recommendations, usually the employee has a relationship with that person, whether it be a friendship or a family member, and because of the recommendation that we get, the person usually knows what they're stepping into before they ever put in the application. They know we're 24/7, they know we're 365, they know there's that we work holidays, nights, and weekends. So when Ms. McBride has someone announce applications are being taken, we usually announce that in-house first. Then we take it outside if we need to. But generally, Cathy, we don't need to take it outside many times, do we?
No, not within the last year. We have not had to do that, because whenever we have an opening in our position, we know we have a long tenure here. So we don't have any layoff, never had to lay off. The employees that come here, they are fully aware of our benefits, and that's one big thing about it. Along with the application, we do give a whole list of the company benefits so they know exactly whether or not they want to apply for that position.
Yes, and we're very fortunate in that we've been in business quite some time now, so that we have actually second-generation personnel here that work for us. They came from the families that work here, and us being a family organization has worked out quite well for us, and we're very proud of that.
And also another thing that I like too, we just revamped our application. Now with that application, it's so generic, you will have to see it. It doesn't cross any of the medical history, doesn't talk about anything physical or mental disabilities. So that application is easy for a person to fill out or complete. Now that's the first thing I look at. If they cannot complete that easy application, that's a first sign right there. Are they going to be able to handle the job requirements that we have here at our company?
Yes, because the application is truly the first impression that we get of the employee. Obviously, we look for honesty. When we have on there that we do drug testing, well, guess what? We do. And a lot of folks, I think they skip over that or breeze over that. I'm not sure exactly, but it's amazing the number of people that don't fully read the application. It's a matter of honesty and reading it and understanding what they're reading once they get the application. And Cathy has done a wonderful job revamping our application, so it's much easier and streamlined for people to understand when they see it.
And one last thing on this slide, one thing you should always do on an application is make it where they have to sign and date it. Once they sign and date it, that means they're agreeing to the terms that's on that application.
Okay, the interview, the second first impression, the day that person comes through the door. This is the first time we actually get to see them, because in the application process, that's usually done with the receptionist or someone that meets and greets them and has them fill out the application. The day of the actual interviews, we could interview anywhere from 45 to 60 people in a day. It just depends on how many applied that particular time. But that is our true, that's the second impression for them, but it's the first impression for us as management.
And what we like to do, even though we give them a copy of the employee benefits when they pick up that application from an existing employee, we also, at the time of the interview, give them another copy of the job description. During the interview itself, I make sure that I specifically go down the benefits. Any questions that need to be asked, they don't have to leave the interview thinking I should have asked a question. The benefits are there. We cover it during the interview, and also they have something tangible to take with them.
And my role in the interview process, we never interview alone. We always have two people, sometimes three, in the interview process, depending on how many people are here that day, but never less than two. And my role is to keep the person being interviewed on task. Sometimes folks like to ramble. Sometimes they like to let us know how smart they are or different things like that. And we're just doing the interview. So I don't mind being the bad cop per se, because Cathy's the one that has to work with them. So we want them to maintain that good relationship with her. My job is to keep them on task, keep them on the topic of the interview, and then move them out and then bring the next person in.
And another thing that we like to give is because during the interview process, a lot of people that we're interviewing, they become really nervous and they have a million questions, but of course they get when they sit down in front of us. Like Don said, we at least have two people at all times, and sometimes there could be three. We also give them a written copy of the schedule that they will be working. By far, that is one of the second most important thing we must give them, is because they need to know that they're going to work weekends and holidays, because you would be surprised of the people that will come in and not be aware what their job schedule would consist of. So that's another thing we like to do.
And absolutely, positively, without a doubt, we have a wonderful relationship with the clerk of courts here. We perform all criminal history checks on potential employees, which is required by us in North Carolina to do so. We're very strict with the rules. We follow the rules that are laid out for us by the state of North Carolina. Of course, in your states, it may be a little different, but we strictly follow those rules, and we don't leave room for a maybe. We go strictly by the book. We go by what it says, and sometimes we have to let employees go as a minor or a young adult. They may have committed the most innocent act, I guess you could say, but in our world, in the adult world of hiring and firing, that one act may be what prevents them from getting this position. So criminal histories, criminal background checks are a very, very important part of what we do.
Okay, another stage, the interview, this next part of this that I really like is the part when it says costly litigations by employees that may be unhappy. And a lot of times when we hire individuals, and sometimes everyone is guilty of this one time, the employee may not know what to expect, where they become upset. One issue that I can come up with, I didn't know I was going to have to work weekends and holidays. Well, that you'll go through the process of bringing this employee on, and now it has cost you time and money. Now this person is really upset because you have them working on a Saturday morning where that's their family time. Well, now this employee is upset. Loss of production. If this person is so upset, maybe it's 2 employees. Now, what are you doing on a Saturday morning when you staff just enough people to cover Saturday morning? Now you're down to more people. Another thing that I really like to think about is keep their training losses to a minimum. In order to do that, be upfront. You have to be upfront during the interview. I like to say we don't sugarcoat it. If you know that you're going to use them to work every weekend, you tell them they're going to have to work every weekend. If you know that you're going to have to use them on third shift once a month, you have to be honest and upfront with them. Because if you're not honest and upfront with them, it's going to come back on you later.
That's correct. We believe in that very, very much. We find that most people get upset when something happens they don't know. That's why we have checklists, and we go through everything with the potential employee from the beginning, from top to bottom, so that there are no blank spaces. Those questions that they forget to ask, we actually answer for them.
Right, and that's really nice too, because no one can ever say that we did something that's not fair, we're unfair about anything, because everything's laid out, and we ourselves have a checklist during our interviewing process. Okay, now training.
With training, it's training the potential employees. Here, of course, everyone's different, but we have a 3-week classroom process that we work with our employees. And we may go through our applications, the initial stage. We may pull 40 applications out of 65. We may interview 35. We may keep 25 for the training. Out of the training, if we keep 15, Kathy?
Yes.
Yes, if we keep about 15 employees out of the initial 60 or so that applied, we feel like we have been successful. One of the main things that I do when I sit in on the interview is, before the training, is try to understand where that employee is, or that potential employee is, on understanding of technology, what their background is, what they may have done in the past that may be beneficial to what they're going to do here. We are a Windows-based world here, I guess you could say, and we just kind of get it. They don't have to be a Microsoft expert or anything, but we want to know that they understand a mouse, a right-click, left-click, all those different things, drop-down boxes, how we use our automation, and it all comes down to the fundamentals of technology.
And one thing I really like, when it says training directly related to the performance of the official duty. That is so true. We don't put any fluff in our training. Everything that a person learns being a central station operator is directly related to the job. One big thing that I'm really keen on is when they come in, we have our training facility set up exactly like our central station. Now, with that, that person knows exactly what to expect. If they're, say they themselves feel like they can't work in closed spaces, well, the training facility is set up for that. Everything that is trained on is directly related to what they're going to be performing on the floor. Now, another thing is training that improves individual and organizational performance. Sometimes you just have to train on being professional. When individuals come in, they don't talk our language. We know that. Just because they work at one call center doesn't mean that they know exactly what we do. So we have to train individuals to be professional. So if there's something related in your field that you know that you want them to focus on, train on it. You can expect them to know it. If you don't tell them, they don't know.
And then what we do is we also look at that employee and say, do they have the potential to learn this technology? Sometimes in the training process is when we lose quite a few people because they are stagnant in their growth and understanding of technology. And it sort of self-weeds itself out because folks just will come to us and say, look, I don't think I can learn this. They're honest. We appreciate the honesty. They say, we're just not able to learn this, and then they decide to move on, and that helps us out greatly. The expected learning time frame that we have, of course, is that first 3 weeks that they spend in the training facility, and I like the fact that our facilities mirror each other. The phone that they use in the training facility is the same phone they will pick up in the central station. Some folks take a little longer to learn. We understand that. But we have operators who have been with us for quite some time that understand Cathy's training processes. So if we have a potential employee with a lot of potential and we see that potential, we're going to put that trainee with a really good operator and let them work and try to do their best to learn our system and what we do. If it comes down to it and we see that they just are having a real hard time, but we really like them as an employee, we really would like to keep them on staff, we will see if they can perform another duty within our organization. We're a fairly large company. We have a sister company as well. If they're really a good employee, we'll try to find another place for them within the organization.
And one thing I do stress about that, don't make up a position for someone for any reason. If they can't perform the task that you have and you don't have another area or department they can go into, don't make up a position for that individual.
Right, because then you're given, it's looking like you're giving preferential treatment to someone because where was that position when I wanted it? How come there was no such position then, but for this new person you have one? Once you start showing preferential treatment like that, things begin to quickly deteriorate. Policy and procedures, the purpose of the handbook. Every employee here gets a handbook, believe it or not, even the owners. We are very, very strict with the policy and procedures handbook that every employee gets. We communicate to the employees the personnel policies and standards of our company. We provide them with written guidance on how to implement and enforce those policies and standards as management. So everybody in some shape or form gets an employee handbook every year. It's not every 2 years or 3 years. It's an every year book.
And one thing, during your training process, please do not just hand them the employee handbook. Make sure that's part of the training. Through the training, you can reference back to an employee handbook. You would be surprised of the individuals that wouldn't have a clue how to reference things in your employee handbook. So that's part of your training. You take it, if you have something about how to take your breaks, well, take them to that. Instead of just telling them the rules and regulations, take them to that part in the employee handbook so they can see that you yourself, the instructor, is referencing the employee handbook as well.
That's a very, very important point because that is a physical, tangible object that you can go back to and say, look, you can't say you didn't know this. I use that a lot when I'm on call. When I'm on call and an employee calls in and gives an excuse for trying not to come to work, I say, look, you know better than that. I know what Ms. McBride teaches. I know what's in the handbook. You can't do this. You need to come to work today.
And what's really nice about that, if they see you using that employee handbook doing training, it will cut down on something that's so important. They will not say, I did not know.
Right.
If you use it during training, they know that you're going to refer back to that employee handbook. And it doesn't have to be something elaborate. It could be policy and procedure that's typed up, something that they can be referenced back to. Also, along with giving them that employee handbook, make sure they sign something stating that stated that they did receive that employee handbook.
Yes, we even have to do that as management. We feel like we can't ask our employees to do something that we wouldn't do ourselves. So each one of us has to sign off that we received our employee handbook every year. The next step that we would like to talk about, we think is critical, and that is motivation for your employees. What motivates them to come to work? You know, like it says there, the highest cost you can incur is a person to make it almost all the way through the training, and then something happened and they lose motivation and you lose that employee. We like to keep a work environment that is conducive to keeping our employees happy and healthy and conscious of what they're doing for a living. This job is not for everyone, and we realize that, and that's why when we get the employees that we do, we try to keep them motivated to keep doing the good job that they do. Cathy, tell us some ways that we use motivation for our employees.
Well, one big way that we use motivation is making sure that we have a steering committee here at Security Central. It doesn't matter how long you've been here. We have some employees on the steering committee that may have been here only a year. Some have been here 6 months. But what that does is it gives them a voice. When it gives them a voice, it lets them know they don't always have to bring things to management. They can bring a comment or solution or anything to the steering committee, and it shows them as the employee that they have a voice within the company. So when they talk to individuals on the steering committee, these individuals will say to them, if you have anything that we can assist you with, please bring it to our attention. So a new person may feel as if, wow, maybe I don't want to go to one of the owners or one of the managers, but if I can go to somebody on the steering committee. And that really motivates our employees to keep it happy, keep it positive, and to make them feel like they have self-worth coming out of the training class. So I make sure individuals on the steering committee comes through to my training classes.
Yes, very important. The employee has to feel self-worth within the company and be able to go to someone to speak to them. Discipline is something that we have to deal with as well. Whether you got one employee or 5,000 employees, at some point you're going to have to use discipline. One of the things that's been maintained with or instilled in Cathy and myself since the very first day that we've been here is to always keep records. You keep records no matter what, and we'll keep records sometimes on an employee till we have to get rid of, till we have to shred it. We like to make sure that we have a good audit trail of that employee's performance.
Now, what's really important to me when it comes to discipline, no one likes that. No one likes to deal with it. But one thing I do stress is don't sweep it under the carpet because it comes back to affect you later. You should demand, not expect the best. That's one big thing here at Security Central.
We believe that if we counsel the employee, now we don't call employees in just to berate them or bash them. We sit with them and we talk with them and we try to figure out what the problem is, because usually it involves 2 or more people. So what we want to do is we want to give that employee the opportunity to sit with us and present their side of the story, something we may not realize going on. We can't be here 24/7. So what we have to do is we have to listen to that employee. Then a lot of times that's all they want is just to be heard, and that's fine. But there's a lot of times, too, that they would like counseling, that they're seeking counseling. So we will sit down with them. We'll give them our best counsel, help them understand that this is just advice on how to correct maybe an issue with another employee, and then they will feel that they got their worth out of the issue, their self-worth back from the issue.
And what's really nice about that as well is it could be a major issue that you see as an employer. To them, it's a big issue. When you sit down, you talk about it, you give them direction in which to go. It may be an alarm that they handle. Okay? It may be a conflict with an employee. Whatever it may be, sitting down, talking the issue out, it resolves itself a lot of the times, but it gives the employees a chance to see that we're taking time out of our day and to see that that problem can be resolved just by communicating as a team.
Yes, and if they feel like they've had the opportunity to correct the problem, then they, again, that's part of the morale, I think, is that they know that they can come to us, they can speak with us if there's a problem, that we'll address the issue. Like Cathy said, we never sugarcoat it or brush it under the rug. We deal with it immediately. We deal with it face to face, and that way it's hopefully resolved at that point.
And don't ever think it will not come up again, because it will. Anything that you do not talk about, work out today, most definitely would come up, and the issues would be a bigger problem at a later date.
So in closing, let's think about how we can have measurable results from our training. Let's determine if that employee is going to be with us past the training period. Let's look at the potential and the future tenure of that employee as a positive thing. And let's look at our rate of return on our investment with that employee through training. Well, after discipline, sometimes if it doesn't work for us, we have to go to termination. And what we feel a lot of times is a term that was given to Cathy and I many, many years ago was that we don't fire employees, they fire themselves.
And that's so true, because after the discipline, no matter how big or small the meeting was, we make sure we write it up and all parties involved will sign it. Now, we also say in that notation that they have to sign if this issue comes up again. There may be a possible suspension, whatever it may be. We let them know what the results will come up if this happens again. That's why Don on this next slide was so important, because we don't ever feel like we fire anyone. They fire themselves, because they know from the beginning, from the discipline meeting that we have, what would happen if these issues continue again, or second time or third time, whatever it comes up. They know that they themselves
have fired themselves.
That's true.
We have given them, in most cases, we have given them every opportunity to correct the situation. We have given them avenues outside of us to help them correct the situations. And if they continue to abuse the system, not show up for work, not call in what we call it a no-call, no-show, then those things happen. They know from day one that there's a possible termination issue involved.
I always say if it's not in writing without a signature, it did not happen.
So that's why we always keep copies, again, of all verbal communication with our employees, any audio communication with our employees, anything that pertains to what that employee is causing within the company. We make sure that we maintain records on that so that it doesn't come back to get us in the end.
Because they clearly need to understand the policy and procedure. It goes back to that. And also, if you have something in your policy and procedure in your employee handbook, always make a copy of that and attach it to that signature for discipline that's going to follow up through termination.
Now, a lot of times after people leave, we would like to have an exit interview. We would like to know what the employees' thoughts are on what they saw here at the company, what they think that maybe we could do better, maybe they should have done better, whatever the case may be. But we would like to get that feedback. Now, sometimes that's difficult to do depending on the circumstances why the employee left, but we've come up with some scenarios that we use that we'd like to share with you. The in-person exit interview with HR. And as you can see, it says the pros can provide information regarding benefits and retrieve company property during the interview, can probe for more information on each question. The cons can be that they can be afraid to share sensitive or negative information, may be too time-consuming for us for one employee, and it's difficult to track information received verbally during the interview.
And also, when someone gives you anything that's going to benefit your company, you may not want to hear it, but you should listen, because some of the things that they're telling you may be true. We all would like to think that we run the best companies out there, but some of the things that your employees say when they're leaving, they have nothing to lose. You should listen.
The second type of exit interview we would like to talk about is the exit interview that involves telephone interviews. Now, a lot of times a third-party consultant is used because folks feel more comfortable talking to someone if they're not actually from within the company. They may feel like they can say things that they wouldn't normally be able to say. The phone interview is a little easier to set up. You can probe a little bit more. You can ask a little bit more in-depth questions. A lot of times people are more willing to answer questions if they don't have to look you right in the eye. And, of course, it's always easier to schedule a phone interview if the person agrees to do so. However, it can be time-consuming, can be expensive if you use an outside consultant, and employees are often reluctant to verbally share sensitive or negative information. But again, like Cathy says, whatever the information is, you've got to be open and receptive to it. You can't throw up the blinders. That, you know, believe it or not, they may actually be right, and you have to be willing to accept that and do something with that information in a positive manner. We all make mistakes, but what we hope is that we only make them once. We don't ever want to lose good employees because we keep making the same mistake over and over again. And with that, with a quick review here, like Cathy said, the theme for the whole class today is
hire for the future, not just for today.
One of the things that we don't like to consider when we own or run or manage a business is that we have to occasionally let employees go. We come to the realization that this work is just not for everyone. So in short, what we would like to suggest is formulate an effective employment screening process.
Explain job descriptions carefully.
Provide rewards and incentives.
Give your employees a second chance.
Always. And then plan for the termination meeting ahead of time if possible. Sometimes that's not possible. Situations dictate that you can't do that. But if you can, be prepared, have people in place, and be ready to make that decision when the time comes. And with that concludes our portion of the interview. And if anyone has any questions, we'd like to answer them.
A great presentation. This is George DeMarco. Again, thank you, Cathy and Don, for doing a great job. Well, let's
go to the,
thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go to the first question. And this is one that I see in different areas in different regions within the country. What avenues do you use to recruit candidates in your area?
We use our current employees to do that. What better way to sell your company other than having someone that currently works here, they know the product, they know your services, they know policy, they know procedure. So when we hire within your employees, they take a lot of that unsureness out of it.
They take the guesswork out of it. We try to do as much promotion and hiring from our internal staff that we can. Occasionally we do have to step outside into the existing job market here in the Charlotte area, which is quite large. So we always do have quite a big pool to draw folks in from. But we do very little advertising for position because our employees do a great job of putting the word out for us.
Great. I think that's great advice because for the most part, your own employees are not going to suggest somebody who doesn't have a similar work ethic. And that's
absolutely.
Nobody wants to work. Nobody wants to work harder than what they're doing at this point. So I'm sure who they're
right.
going to suggest. Yeah.
That's true, George.
So another question I have is, what criteria do you use to determine what candidates move from the various stages of the hiring process, such as application interview? And in all this, I want to ask another following question, is in the interview process and the background check, do you ever go and look at Facebook or LinkedIn or some other social networking site to look at what they do from that aspect?
Well, George, on the social media aspect, that's still all relatively foreign territory or not really sturdy ground yet, I think, within the courts. I do know that in preparation for this, I did research the social media aspect of hiring, and one of the questions that seems that employees are asking to have potential employees bring their Facebook page up while they're sitting there. Now, we've never done anything like that. We haven't asked for any social media previews or anything like that, but we do see it as a potential in the future where more and more employees, but determined by the courts first, if that's an acceptable practice. Now, as far as how we decide who goes from the application stage to the interview stage, I'm going to let Cathy handle that.
Okay, from the application stage, once we determine whether or not they're of the appropriate age. We can't say how old are you, but we can make sure that by the state they have to be at least 18. They cannot have a criminal record. Now, from that, they can move forward to the interview process. During the interview process, one thing that we look at is dress and grooming, because we do state that we have a dress code here. And it's okay for us to say if they cannot come to our interview dressed appropriately, are they going to be able to meet the criteria of being on the floor with having a dress code? Mm-hmm. Also, how do they present themselves? Also, can they perform different tasks that we ask? Maybe, have you ever worked in a call center? Have you ever had any telephone skills for business purposes? Can you type? Things such as that will advance to the being hired for the process.
Yeah, and George, you family member time. This is what they consider appropriate dress, mannerism, language, and things like that. So most of the time, the internal people that we have referred to us, they come prepared in understanding what we expect as an organization.
And it's really nice because our interview process is so easy. It seems like it's more fun than it is work because, like we said, our current employees have already told them the things to expect. You need to be dressed this way. Well, they see them. They see how they leave home, or they see them on the weekends. So they see these same individuals. So if we have a current employee that has a uniform on or the way they're dressed, the person that's applying for the position have already seen the current employee. So therefore, it takes a lot of our work out of it because when they come for the interview, they're dressed appropriately.
Right. And they know what we expect from them as far as what the position they're being looked at for.
Yes.
Great. Great. Okay. This is a great question, this next one. If the job requires climbing of ladders, installation, techniques and whatnot, can you ask on the application if they are capable of performing those necessary tasks?
Well, George, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's kind of a fine line. We actually kind of depend on the employee to tell us what they can and can't do as far as physical work goes. Most folks that come to interview on our installation side of our company have come from other companies already. That's not really a question we asked them. We're more interested in understanding, do you understand the difference between a parallel and series circuit? What's the difference between an open switch, closed switch? How does a PIR work? What is passive? What is active? Things like that. The physical nature we kind of stay away from, so we lean more towards, do you understand electronics and things like that?
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's great advice. And one of the things you need to do is probably consult with your local, state, and federal government laws that you have. But
right.
If an employee is responsible, installation employee is responsible for wiring, and they cannot identify the colors within that wire, I'm sure that there is something that is considered in that case. So
right, and
yeah, go ahead.
And I do think, George, something that is a fair question you can ask is, can you perform the basic functions of this position with or without accommodations?
That's a fair question to ask.
Right, that's correct. Okay, here's another. Go ahead.
I was going to say, then if they mislead you, that will be obvious, and then that's cause for termination.
Right, absolutely. Here's another question on about orientations. Do you in your company conduct orientations for new employees, and what do you cover in that session, and should it be a company standard?
Yes, orientation should be a standard. It can be an hour, it can be 30 minutes, but you should have orientation set aside separately from your training. What orientation does, it gives that new employee time to fill out all the necessary paperwork without being rushed. They have time to ask questions about the information that they're signing off on. This should be a standard for everyone. Sometimes I think when people say orientation, they think this is a day-long process where you have to serve coffee and danishes and things such as that, but it doesn't have to be like that. It should be time set aside to familiarize the new employee with all the company policy. Even though you feel that you've already done it during the initial interview, you should always set aside time for orientation for a new hire.
And one thing Cathy does as well during orientation is this is when the potential employees get to meet the ownership and management teams here at our office, so that they can see that, you know, they can put faces with the names. They understand who these people are. They understand who we are. They understand our role within the company. And it's just a nice social organization time when people can meet and talk, and without any pressure or any kind of push or hurry to get done, like Cathy said.
Absolutely. Great. Here's another question that came in. How often do you provide a formal review of an employee?
With a formal review, now that could be different stages. If we're going to advance them to a new department, we will review them at that time, because in order for us to move you to another stage, then that means you're doing something right. So they're eligible for a review at that time. If they're going to be moving, let's say, from one department and they're going past another area, say if they're skipping 2 departments to move up the ladder, they're reviewed each time they move to a different department at all times. And also, another thing too, George, I'm sorry, I kind of slipped off on that one. Another thing that we do, when we review individuals, we review them every 6 months to a year.
Gotcha. And with that, just do you have, is that tied to some sort of salary increase at that point in time, or is that a separate function?
Well, that's going to be salary increase for one, and it could also involve vacation or time off.
Right. We have a policy in place where when we work with the employees for their reviews, that we have a system that Cathy uses to grade them throughout the time period, say 6 months or a year, whichever it is. And in that time period, they meet certain criteria. They get a certain number of check marks or points, if you will, for meeting certain levels within their own departments. And then through that, Cathy's able to determine at that time when they have that meeting if they're actually taking steps forward, if they're taking a step backward, and then how they can correct that so this person can get the most benefit from the interview and then their potential raise or whatever they might get.
Gotcha. Thank you. I've got a couple more questions. Do you have any programs that help keep the employee turnover to a minimum? And if so, could you describe 1 or 2 of them?
Okay, one of the biggest incentive that we have is they receive, because of attendance and performance, they can receive a 3% of their gross salary and extra vacation time every 6 months. That is the biggest motivator here, because the employee, they're being rewarded for doing a good job. Now that does a lot for us as a company. A lot of people just think that's like just giving money away, but we're benefiting also because it cuts down on our mistakes. It makes them feel important because they know they're going to get something at the end of the day. So at the end of 6 months, so twice a year, they're getting 3% of their gross salary and extra vacation time.
Yes, and that is quite a motivator, and we actually have very little turnover because of that. What's amazing too, George, to keep employees motivated and to keep them from having turnover is that we actually allow the employees to work a shift that they like. Our third shift employees, I've never seen happier people leave a building at 7 o'clock in the morning in my life, because they love third shift. That's the shift they want to work. Anytime that we have ever tried to move someone to third or have someone work third for a while, even knowing they were going to come off it, they're always angry about having to work third shift. If you find an employee that likes a certain shift, you know, why mess? Allow them to remain happy, keep them on the shift that they're on, and let them do their job.
Gotcha. And one last question I have here. How often do you update your employee manual, and who is responsible for that in your company? Are you there?
Year employee handbook, but we have we have addendums that we put with it. Our HR department and our legal team is the one that updates that employee handbook. Now, we will give it an overhaul at least every 2 to 3 years, but we do have addendums that we do add in it at least once a year and sometimes twice a year.
Mm-hmm. Depends what happens in the courts when it comes to, that's why we have a legal team as well. They maintain and they look at all these legislative changes and things like that within our state, and then they let us know, hey, you guys need to work on your handbook. We need to make some changes, some addendums, and we rely heavily on them to do that for us. And also, George, I want to step back just for a second. We also offer a lot of pre-tax incentives, such as with Blue Cross and FLAC and different programs that we have. And our employees seem to really like that as well.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank Cathy and Don. They did a great job. I know that you guys would all be clapping for them if we could hear you, but we can't do that at this moment. But we really appreciate your wonderful insights, Cathy and Don. To learn more about successful employee management with Cathy and Don, I encourage you to attend the full-length seminar at ESX 2012 on Tuesday, June 26th at 4:45 p.m. Early bird pricing is $59 for association members and $109 for non-members. Speaking of early bird pricing, it's time to lock in your registration and savings for ESX 2012 in Nashville, Tennessee. As soon as this webinar is complete, please head to ESXweb.com and register for this year's event. I have a catalog in my hand right now that is chock full of great seminars, from installation to business development. If you missed any portion of this session or would like to review it again or share it with others, the recording of this webinar will be made available soon on ESXweb.com. Thank you again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you and your team at ESX 2012, June 26th through the 29th in Nashville. This concludes the webinar.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you.